There's a story behind every enemy in Resident Evil. Some of those stories are told to you directly, but others are a bit more obscure, buried in the environment, and in subtle hints you can easily miss. One of those hidden stories is that of El Gigante. It's one of the most overlooked yet detrimental parts of the village and Las Plagas' story. A surprisingly big factor in how the village actually ended up the way it did, and how Las Plagas spread so quickly. In the original game, El Gigante didn't have much narrative weight, but in the remake, we finally learned where they came from, and considering how uncontrollable they were, why they were even allowed to exist in the first place. And what we find is disturbing. A tragic origin and an even darker secret purpose. Las Plagas was an ancient parasitic organism, possibly originating from the same region as the progenitor flower in Africa, and perhaps even mutated by it to become what it's known as today. Over time, it spread across continents, carried by migrating animals and early humans who unknowingly became hosts, eventually reaching Europe. The parasite established itself in a remote mountainous region of Spain known as Valdelobos, the place where this entire story begins. Though the plaga was feared, some saw it as divine and began worshipping it. From that devotion rose a cult called Los Illuminados, who sought to spread the parasite's influence through rituals, sacrifices, and manipulation. But as the plaga's threat grew, the Salazar family, Catholic nobility ruling Spain at the time, crushed the cult and sealed the remaining parasites deep within caverns beneath their castle, building their ancestral fortress directly over the burial site to ensure it never saw the light of day again. Centuries later, Los Illuminados resurfaced under a new leader, Osmond Sadler, a descendant of the original cult. This time, they had one crucial advantage: the current Salazar heir, Ramon Salazar, a frail and insecure young man who many saw as unfit to lead. Sadler exploited his need for respect and belonging, convincing him that reopening the sealed caves would prove his worth and fulfill his family's legacy. Ramon ordered the village of Valdelobos, a once quiet, self-sufficient farming community hidden deep in the mountains, to begin excavating the fossilized amber buried beneath the castle. For generations, this isolated village had lived in peace, cut off from the outside world, relying on its livestock, crops, and tight-knit families. That peace ended the moment Salazar's decree was given, forcing every able-bodied villager to dig through the caves for the amber that held dormant plagas, unknowingly digging up the parasite that would soon consume them all. After the excavation began, the villagers started to change. At first, it was subtle. The villagers grew distant, and their families began to notice something was wrong. No one understood what was happening. What they didn't know was that every day they spent digging the amber was sealing their fate. Tiny spores and dormant parasites hidden within the stones had begun infecting the workers as they inhaled them deep underground. The plaga was spreading, silently and invisibly, long before anyone realized they were already hosts. Its process was slow at first, because it couldn't easily spread through the air or water from person to person. Every infection came directly from contact with the fossilized parasites buried inside. But the true nightmare started when Los Illuminados themselves descended upon the village. Under the guise of religious purification, they began deliberately injecting villagers with plagas. The once lively and welcoming community became unrecognizable. The entire population had been enslaved under Sadler's control. The parasite's ability to dominate its host through a single controlling plaga became Sadler's ultimate weapon, a tool he intended to spread far beyond Valdelobos and across the entire world. As the cult's rituals continued, they began taking everything from the village: crops, livestock, and eventually their own children, taken as sacrifices for something far more sinister, all in the name of their so-called holy purpose. Villagers who were injected with Las Plagas lost their independence and mental sharpness, unable to farm or carry out daily work, which quickly drove the village toward starvation. But this starvation wasn't just caused by neglect. There was a much darker reason. Most of the children sacrificed for plaga experimentation didn't survive the infection, leading to the near extinction of the village's next generation. Through their experiments, they discovered a rare few infants who survived, only to suffer a fate worse than death. These infants didn't become mind control slaves like the villagers. Instead, something far more extreme happened. They experienced an accelerated growth cycle. By 6 months, they began growing teeth and were large enough to swallow a dog whole. Because of their size, they could no longer be kept in their homes, so they were moved to the town hall, where they continued to be fed and grew even larger. By 9 months, they had already outgrown the town hall itself, forcing the cult to relocate them again. At 10 months old, they were transferred to the quarry, the only place that could hold them at this size, but their growth only sped up. One giant could devour a full-grown cow in just 3 days. A little over a year later, one of these creatures nearly ate a villager, its endless hunger consuming everything the village could offer. By 17 months, it had reached nearly full size, and feeding it became impossible. With only a few cows left and starvation right around the corner, the villagers could no longer sustain it. Under orders from Salazar Castle, now firmly under Los Illuminados' control, a cultist was called in. With the ritual incantation, the giant was finally put into a deep sleep and sealed behind the massive gate of the quarry. By this point, the village was in terrible shape. Its working population was practically gone, replaced with infected hosts who could no longer farm or provide for themselves, and what little food they could grow or hunt was never enough. Yet, Sadler needed as many infected humans as possible to expand his influence and strengthen Los Illuminados. So why invest so much effort into raising and maintaining these giants, when they could have easily destroyed the very village Sadler had spent considerable time and resources converting? Because of their sheer size, one of their uses was as living weapons. A single El Gigante could easily crush any intruders or threats, so a few were stationed strategically in the village and Salazar Castle, the two key entry points into the region. They could be woken up when needed and put back into a deep sleep when their task was complete. But there was another, far more tragic reason for their existence. As Leon approaches the quarry where the first giant is kept, he finds a massive pickaxe, far too large for any human to wield. This subtle detail hints at the actual reason they were made for. These creatures weren't only weapons, they were tools. Sadler's ultimate goal was to spread Las Plagas across the globe, and for that, he needed a massive supply of viable parasites. Beneath Salazar Castle was the vast network of caverns, still full of the amber containing fossilized plagas, just waiting to be unearthed. The children sacrificed to the cult weren't just turned into monsters, they were turned into unwilling laborers. The giant's size and strength made them more effective than any infected villager, and at least one of them was kept in the mines alone, digging through stone and amber to harvest more plagas. Sadler had transformed these children into slaves bred for excavation. Each El Gigante might look like just another Plaga bioweapon, but if you look at their behavior closely, you begin to notice how much they actually resemble children. They act recklessly, running into walls, throwing objects, lashing out at everything nearby, and getting easily distracted. They show no real control or obedience, following the chaotic impulses of a child, only on a much bigger and scarier scale. Their intellect does seem to vary. For example, the one in the castle showed a bit more awareness by crushing boulders and hurling them, while others, like the ones Ada and Leon fought, relied mostly on brute strength. Since these giants couldn't be fully controlled, it's still unclear how much influence dominant Plagas had over them. All we know is they could be put into a forced sleep and reawakened at will. It's possible that there were many failed attempts to create these giants. Evidence of this can be seen in the town hall, where a massive skull with a separate jaw is displayed, a deformity similar to that of growing infants, suggesting an incomplete fusion. We also don't know if the cult was ever truly successful in using these creatures as workers. Their behavior varied enough that it seems each was assigned to a specific role. The first, perhaps the most uncontrollable one, had to be locked away in the quarry. The second, armored and capable of throwing rocks, was stationed to guard the castle, and one was relegated to the mines, likely kept alive only for digging. Interestingly, the number of El Gigantes across the original and the remake is nearly identical. In both versions, Leon faces one in the quarry early on, and a second in the village, the same one Ada also encounters there in the remake. Both versions feature two giants in the mines. The giant fought in the castle later reappears in the mines, identifiable by the head injury it sustained. In the original game, their backstory was minimal, the main explanation being that they were once humans surgically implanted with Las Plagas in their spines, also explaining why the parasite emerges from their backs. But instead of portraying them as island test subject byproducts like the files in the original described, it reframes their origins in a different light. The only other game to feature Plaga-based giants is Resident Evil 5, which introduced a larger and more aggressive version. This one contained multiple Type 2 Plagas within its body, and was said to have been inspired by Los Illuminados' original El Gigante experiments. Unlike the cult's creations, however, this one was developed as a true bioweapon, one that Trisel attempted to sell to buyers in Kijuju before it broke loose and attacked a BSAA unit. These giants may actually be the largest humanoid experiments in the entire Resident Evil series, even surpassing the biggest tyrants. It's interesting to imagine what Umbrella might have created had they combined their resources with Las Plagas' mutagenic effects. But regardless of their origin, it's sad to remember that you were essentially fighting children. Their accelerated growth meant their bones expanded too quickly, and their bodies were likely under immense pressure and constant pain all the time. Every fight against them can be seen less as defeating a monster, and more as ending their suffering. And even after all that agony, we still don't know whether Los Illuminados ever truly considered them useful, or if the cult ultimately abandoned the project. And considering Sadler's plan for the rest of the world, it was probably better if they did.